Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving straight into a genuinely fascinating piece of historical detective work. We're going to trace a remarkably rare surname, Czerniachowicz, across centuries of shifting borders, imperial collapses, and some truly profound political upheavals. Now, this isn't just your standard family tree. It's practically a masterclass in how history is recorded, how it inevitably gets erased, and exactly how we can claw the truth back from the archives.
Okay, let's dive into this. Here is the roadmap for our case file today. First, tracking the truth. Then, origins and noble clients. The heraldry paradox. Surviving the Russian Empire. Tragedy in the Soviet era. And finally, Antoni's journey to exile. So, starting off with Section 1, Tracking the Truth, Methodology to Mystery. Before we actually get into the history itself, you've got to understand the sheer scale of the challenge here. When you're tracing a lineage through the eastern borderlands, a region repeatedly swept by war and regime changes, records don't just disappear, they fragment. So we're faced with a massive question. How do we separate historical fact from family myth? When a grandmother's oral history says one thing, but a dusty parish record says another, which do we actually trust? For this explainer, we have to treat this like a genealogical cold case. It requires absolute, strict methodological discipline. To do that, we're going to rely on a specific set of evidence tiers. Think of this as our grading system for the truth. Notice that top tier there, documented. That means we have a primary source in hand, a physical piece of paper, a register, a tangible certificate. Right below that, we have strong circumstantial matches, then plausible hypotheses, and down at the bottom, family memory. Now, oral history is incredibly valuable for pointing us in the right direction, absolutely. But in this explainer, if it's not verified by a primary record, we just aren't going to call it a fact. Moving on to Section 2, Origins and Noble Clients, the latifundium system. Let's set the scene. In the 16th and 17th centuries, the Volhynian voivodeship, which is an area in modern-day Ukraine that was part of the vast Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth, was dominated by these massive estates. They were owned by hyper-wealthy magnates and basically operated like independent states. Well, the suffix of our surname, Ovich, shows exactly where the family fit into this whole system. In the context of these eastern borderlands, this suffix literally denoted originating from or being a dependent of a specific place, in this case, the town of Czerniachiv. So the key takeaway here is that they weren't the sovereign lords of the estate. The powerful Nimrich magnates held that title. The Czerniachowicz family were minor client nobility. They were vassals, leaseholders, administrative folks whose very name essentially broadcast their service to that specific estate. All right, Section 3, the heraldry paradox. Correcting digital errors. Now, what's really interesting about this is how the internet can actually work against us. You'd think digital databases would make historical research flawless, right? Well, it turns out they're actually incredibly good at confidently broadcasting old mistakes. Let me explain. In 1802, Archival Reality definitively documented the Czerniachowicz family with the Oxa coat of arms, a silver battle axe on a red shield. But 19th century historians, struggling to copy messy cursive script, completely confused the rare name Czerniachowicz with a much more prominent family called Czerniewski, who used a totally different coat of arms called Sreniava. Fast forward to today, modern digital scrapers ingested that old 19th century typo and just blasted it across the internet, creating this massive digital echo chamber of completely false information. Which brings us to a defining, absolutely crucial rule for our investigation. In the discipline of historical genealogy, the original physical ledger written by Clarkes and Shitomir in 1802 must always supersede the aggregated, error-prone compilations of later centuries. This is exactly why our documented evidence tier is so strict. We have to go back to those original Clarkes and Shitomir, not rely on a modern Wikipedia page. Which leads us to Section 4, Surviving the Russian Empire. The bureaucracy of legitimization. So in the late 18th century, the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth was practically erased from the map, and Volhynia was swallowed whole by the Russian Empire. Russian bureaucrats viewed the massive population of minor Polish nobility as a serious threat, so they instituted this brutal, punishing bureaucracy. If minor nobles couldn't prove their status with ancient parchments, seals, and court records, they faced what was called declassing. This meant being stripped of their rights, turned into state peasants, and subjected to a grueling 25-year forced military conscription. Navigating this system was literally a matter of survival. And yet, against all odds, on December 29, 1802, the Czerniachowicz family managed to produce the documents and successfully prove their lineage, officially getting recorded as record number 2925 in the Volhynian Nobles' Deputation. And we see that very same administrative resilience decades later, brilliantly demonstrated by Reverend Nikodem Czerniachowicz. Operating in the Russian naval port of Mykolaiv, which was an incredibly tough environment for a Polish Catholic priest, he spent 11 grueling years just securing authorization and funding from the empire. He managed to ally with the local city Duma, and by 1896, he successfully built and consecrated the towering neo-Gothic St. Joseph's Church. It's a true masterpiece of civic integration and minority survival. Next up is Section 5, where things take a somber turn: tragedy in the Soviet era, the 1914 household, and 1930s repressions. As we move into the 20th century, our rigid archival evidence suddenly collides with immense historical trauma. What we're looking at now is the absolute keystone document of the modern family timeline, the 1914 Roman Catholic confessional list for their village. It lists Teofila as the widowed head of the household along with her 7 children. This includes Antoni, who we'll be following very closely in a moment. But fascinatingly, this primary document introduces a new contested mystery for our tiers. Family trees maintained by modern relatives list another brother named Boleslav, but he is completely, inexplicably missing from this 1914 imperial record. It's a glaring gap that reminds us just how fragmented history can really be. The fate of these siblings during the 1930s is, frankly, tragic. During this time, the Soviet state initiated severe repressions. To look at this, we rely impartially on the Mierzejewski database of victims. We find a strong match for the brother Józef, who was executed during the NKVD Polish operation in January 1938. The patronymic and the village match perfectly. However, the record for the brother Jan is labeled contested. The name and patronymic fits, but the birthplace and the execution log is completely wrong. It just goes to show that even in the midst of state terror, the bureaucracy leaves behind mysteries. We also uncover records from July 1931, where Soviet interrogation protocols specifically name Antoni in connection with an alleged counter-revolutionary insurgent organization that was reportedly hoarding 87 weapons. Now, it is absolutely crucial to view this impartially. These are coercive state investigation records. What they detail are the terrifying accusations the Soviet state was leveling against its citizens at the time, not necessarily verified objective facts of an actual, real-life armed uprising. Bringing us to our final chapter, Section 6, Antony's Journey to Exile, Survival and Diaspora. And this brilliantly illustrates the sheer harrowing sweep of the 20th century for Eastern Europeans. Amidst all that repression, Antonia makes a documented escape that scatters the family line into the global diaspora. Born in 1898, the records show that by 1940 he was deported to a special settlement in the freezing Arkhangelsk region of Russia. But then, following an amnesty agreement in 1941, he was released. By 1945, archival records remarkably place him and his family thousands of miles away in a refugee camp in Uganda, Africa. Finally, a 1950 alien registration certificate proves his safe arrival in England. That is a fully documented journey across 3 continents just to escape the grip of the Soviet state. Just 33. According to demographic data from the year 2020, that is the total number of living males in the entire country of Poland today bearing the Czerniachowicz surname. It's a stark, emotional summary, isn't it? It represents the incredibly heavy demographic toll taken by centuries of conflict, shifting borders, and intense state repressions. So what does this all mean for us? Through sheer determination, this one family's story was rescued from cursive errors and forgotten ledgers. And it leaves us with a pretty provocative question. How much of our own history is locked away right now in unread archives, or totally corrupted by digital errors, just waiting for us to uncover the real truth? Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer, and I truly hope this inspires you to look a little closer at the mysteries hiding in your own family tree.